By the way, anybody, we're doing a new YouTube link, so tell all your staff that there's going to be a new YouTube link on the website because we started and stopped. By the way, anybody, we're doing a new YouTube link.
Hi, everyone. Did you happen to see Miguel working there?
It's finished.
Thank you. He is the IT expert for PRC, so you're likely to see him again, actually. Can everyone hear me? Miss Lees, can you hear me? Yes, and Mr. Rice is.
I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Wonderful. There's Mr. Gedko. You guys moved around on my screen again. You do that to me all the time. Let's see if you have video. Let's just check. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, first of all, we're off the record. Let me just, if I haven't apologized 10 times yet, for about a year and a half, I've been conducting meetings, not meetings, hearings and meetings, actually. Hearings and meetings from my house. Today was the first time I ever couldn't conduct a meeting or hearing from my house. So I guess I'm giving you excuses rather than apologizing, but that's my excuse. And you know, I don't have an explanation. It's the internet system. It was acting a little. Yesterday was no problem. You were all here, and this morning it was just acting weird. I was getting stop motion things, and it just, as you know, stopped. And then I was lucky enough to get back on and recess for an hour. I hope you all got that message and you all were able to take a lunch break or something. Well, that's good. Thank you. What I did was jumped in my car, loaded all my stuff, and I have a lot of stuff because you guys generate a lot of stuff. And I ran down here. Luckily, it's pretty close. I had to park the car and walk over to the building. And believe it or not, our excellent IT staff was standing by waiting for me. And they got me all set up and all rolling. So we should not have any problems. What I'd like to do when we start back up on the record is ask Mr. Lee to read back exactly where we cut off. Strangely enough, I believe it was an opportune moment. I believe I had just admitted into the record Ms. Lega Tessero's direct testimony, and there were no objections. Does anybody remember? Is that your memory as well?
Judge, if you want me to read back, I've got to change files. And the last thing you did was admit Staff Exhibit 2.
That's what I needed to know. I needed to know that it actually was admitted. And that's my recollection as well. So, Ms. Lega Tessero, you would be subject to cross-examination immediately thereafter. So I think we'll start with your cross-examination. After we go back on the record, I'm just going to give a really brief explanation of why we were on a different, why we had to take an early lunch break, to the best of my knowledge. Does anybody have any other questions or any other suggestions before we go on the record again? No. Okay, Mr. Lee, please start back on the record again. And thank you. We're back on the record again. This is still case number 21-00148 UT, matter of Southwest Public Service Company's application for authorization to implement grid modernization. It is now 12:08 p.m. A bit of an unusual occurrence happened. My internet, with which I was conducting the Zoom meeting, stopped working. Fortunately, it allowed me to get back on for at least a brief amount of time and to have a recess until 12 noon or so. And during that hour or so, I made it down to the office here, the PRC's new office, in my personal office. And I got our IT expert these guys work all the time. They're working here in the building, even when we're not using the building for the public. And they fortunately got me online and set up on this computer in my office. So that's the story. We are back at 12:08. We are back on the record. My recollection, which was confirmed by Mr. Lee, is that staff exhibit number 2, the direct testimony of Ms. Leba Tesoro, has been admitted, although she has not been subject to cross-examination, as all witnesses are. So we're about to move on to cross-examination. I don't have any particular order. In fact, I like to not have an order. But usually I will start with the applicant, who's SPS. So Ms. Lees, would you like to cross-examine Ms. Tercero?
Thank you, Your Honor. SPS has no cross for Ms. Leba Tercero. Thank you, Ms. Leba Tercero, for making yourself available today.
Thank you.
And Ms. Hardy, do you have any cross-examination?
No, I don't, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rice?
I don't have any cross either. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Bagatko?
I have no cross for Ms. Leba Tesoro, but thank you for asking, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Welcome, Mr. Bagatko. Are you in the building as well?
Yes, I am.
Interesting. Mr. Bartel, any cross?
No cross for this witness.
Thank you. And Mr. Gedko?
No, no cross. Thank you.
Ms. Tesoro, they're just making your life so easy. And my life a little bit easier, although I do enjoy some cross-examination. I reviewed your testimony, and I make notes actually on the paper as I review and I write. Let me just page through and make sure I didn't have any ambiguities that I wanted to clarify. I don't exactly cross-examine as much as examine. I do have a star here. Let me see what I wanted to ask you. First of all, I'll ask you 2 questions. First, on page 5, you stated that staff does recommend approval of SPS's advanced grid customer education.
I'm sorry, Judge. Can you slow down? You stated on page 5, you stated
that yes, staff recommends approval of SPS's advanced grid customer education and communication plan. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And essentially, through your testimony, for the parts of that were delegated to you to opine upon, you indicate that staff likewise suggest approval of the SPS plan, correct?
Correct, with modifications to the GMR based on the revenue requirement recommendations addressed by Ms. Dashino.
Exactly, and you wanted to also remove, let me see if I got this straight. You had a reporting requirement, a specific reporting requirement of the actual one-time costs associated with the opt-out option for customers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Page 14. So you get into a little bit more specificity as to the reporting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 16, that's where you mentioned the removal of amortization of the legacy meters from the revenue requirement
I'm sorry, Judge, you broke up. Removal of the,
Removal of the legacy meters from the GMR revenue requirement. So that's the more substantial change you're recommending, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Give me one more minute. I'm looking at my notes here. Some of my questions when I initially read this have been answered, by reading the other testimony, so I don't have the questions anymore. When you run the two alternative stream of payments regarding the undepreciated legacy meters, like the 10-year or the 2-year, do you reduce that stream over time to a present value as of today when you do the comparison?
So Ms. Dashino made adjustments to the revenue requirement to reflect the removal of the amortization of the legacy meters. And then so I took those updated revenue requirement numbers and plugged those into Mr. Luth's exhibits using the 2-year model that was presented by the company. And so you'll see the change reflected in those, the first 2 years. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does somewhat. I suspected that there might not have been a present value adjustment for the 2-year, but I was wondering to make sure there was one for the 10, the longer stream, and I was wondering what what discount rate you're applying for the present value computations. But now I understand that that's not something that you actually did, but you used their figures. When I read your testimony, the question came in my mind, and that's why I notated it in the testimony. But I won't withdraw the question, but I appreciate your answer. I really do. I don't have any other ambiguity that I want to address, but since I did open perhaps the door to a different line of question, I'll go through you guys and see if you had any follow-up questions. Ms. Lee, any follow-up on my questioning?
SPS has no follow-up. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy, if you are SPS, you have no follow-up, correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And Mr. Rice, none?
No, Your Honor.
Or Mr. Bagato?
Not necessary. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Mr. Bartel, pressure space key. Mr. Gecko, any other questioning?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Bartel?
No questions. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. And I didn't want to complicate things with Ms. Tercero. I just don't want her to lose her, and then the question comes up in my mind, and I don't have an opportunity to ask her. So I believe we're finished with Ms. Tercero. You called her, Mr. Bagato. Could you please release her for the day and call your next witness?
Yes, please, Mr. Cerro, you are free to go. Per Mr. Hearing Examiner's directive, I would call our next witness, Eli LaSalle.
Hi, Mr. LaSalle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me all right?
Wonderful. And yes, I can hear you. You have that blank wall. Are you in the Pocum building?
Yes, I am.
Oh boy, we could all put on our mask and did it in one room. This end. Yes, Mr. Lee is going to swear you in, and I believe Mr. Bagato is going to ask you some questions. Okay, Mr. LaSalle?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
would you please raise your right hand?
Sorry, I had my YouTube open still.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bagacho, thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. LaSalle, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well so far today.
Well, we're going to try to move some direct testimony of yours into the record. Are you ready to help me out with that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, you do recollect filing some direct testimony in this case on October 8th, 2021, I assume, correct?
Yes.
And I've taken that and pre-marked it as Staff Exhibit 3, and I trust and hope you have a copy of what I've pre-marked there in front of you today.
Yes, I have a copy.
Would you take a moment and just flip through that and make sure that is a complete and accurate rendition of the direct testimony you filed in this case on October 8th?
Yes, it is.
And am I correct in understanding that this direct testimony of yours was prepared by you or at your direction? Is that safe to presume, Mr. LaSalle?
Yes, I would like to clarify that the attachment to this testimony is a response by SPS.
Fair enough. Thank you for that clarification. But that is something that was a response to a discovery request from staff, correct?
Yes.
And you've incorporated that into your testimony because you rely on it on part to render your recommendations in that case. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I also understand that you don't have any corrections to make to your testimony today. Is that correct?
Not that I know of.
All right. And Mr. LaSalle, if you were asked the same questions as what we see posed here in your direct testimony today at this proceeding, would your answers to those questions be the same as what we see there in Staff Exhibit 3?
Yes.
All right. Well, with that, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I would respectfully move Mr. LaSalle's direct testimony that has been pre-marked as Staff Exhibit 3 into the evidentiary record for this proceeding.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bagacho. Let's see if there's any objection. Ms. Lees, any objection?
SPS has no objection. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Hardy as well?
Correct, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Rice?
No objection. Thank you.
Mr. Gedko?
No objection, Your Honor.
And last but not least, Mr. Randy Bartel.
No objections.
Thank you all once again for making it easy for me. There is no objection. I don't really have to decide. It is admitted. The motion is granted. Staff Exhibit number 3 is admitted into the record. It's now part of the evidence and will be considered. I have a question or two. That's not really short testimony, but I'm going to ask first if anybody, it's not really long testimony. I'll ask first if anyone else has any questions, starting with Ms. Lees.
SPS has no cross-examination of this witness, and thanks Mr. LaSalle for making himself available today.
Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
I have no questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rice?
No questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Bartel?
No questions for this witness.
PG, Mr. Gitko, do you have any questions?
No, no questions for this witness. Thank you.
Okay, I just had a couple questions. I'm actually a former student of finance. I have a degree in finance. And I'm looking at page 6, and you found that the 20-year useful life for AMI meters is supported by the decision of numerous regulatory bodies in other jurisdictions. And I don't want to be one of those lemmings that follows all the other lemmings off the cliff. So I'm not really fond of those kind of answers, to be frank with you. Why? Other than just that's the way everybody else does it, which seems to be like a state mantra. But why is 20-year useful life a good estimate? And the reason I'm asking you is that the last meters were expected to go for 40 years. At least they would use the depreciation schedule of 40 years. And that was way too long. So why are these meters expected to last 20 years?
Yes. So these advanced meters as far as I understand it, haven't been really deployed long enough in any jurisdiction to have enough hard data to definitively say this is the useful life of an AMI meter. The 20-year lifespan that's been used in other jurisdictions is based on just projections for what we believe the technology will still be applicable for. Part of that has to do with just the fact that the technology seems to be changing more quickly now.
Precisely.
Yes. And in 20 years, as I understand it, these meters will be most likely becoming outdated, needing replacement, and potentially not last as long due to the digital nature versus the mechanical nature of the previous meters.
Well, as you know, the time period results in a certain depreciation charge over time, and that gets into the computations, and that gets into the return on investment and the ROR, and then it gets all down to the most important reason we're here, which is the rider rate. So it really does matter. It sifts all the way through all that analysis. So that's why I was wondering where 20 years came from. With the new these cell phone things, they become obsolete very quickly, and I was wondering if these sophisticated electronic meters also are likely to become obsolete more quickly, and something even less than 20 years might have been considered or might have been appropriate. It's good to know that other regulatory bodies are adopting a 20-year. It gives a little bit of confidence. But like I said, maybe they're all doing it because everyone else is doing it as well. And that's you have considered that, however.
Yes.
Consider these things.
Yes, and as I understand it, I don't recall the exact location, but if I'm remembering correctly, 15 years has been used previously, with 20 years being much more the standard.
Well, in another witness's testimony, it was said that these type of meters had been used as far back, I believe, as 2007. So they're still here since 2007. Let's see, how many years is that? 20, almost 15 years right there. Right? So my next question is, if you bear with me, given the 20 years, 5% depreciation a year, straight line depreciation works out really wonderfully for 20 years. It's easy to figure out. It seems obvious. But why did you believe that straight line depreciation is the correct type of depreciation?
As far as I understand it, straight line depreciation is what is approved, has been approved by the commission for utilities to recover on assets, and that's just what's used.
Right, for our computation purposes, not necessarily tax purposes or reality purposes of the
Yes, just
the asset. I get it. But for computation of the rates and types of things at the commission, you use this straight line depreciation. I understood that, but it has to come from you in order for it to be evidence, and that's why I ask. Okay, I don't have any other questions of this witness, so I opened, like I said, a line of questioning, so I give everybody an opportunity to clarify or ask more questions on that within the scope of that. So Ms. Lees, any questions?
SPS has no further questions for this witness. Thank you.
I'm afraid to ask Ms. Hardy, but I'm going to ask her anyhow. You have any questions?
I do not, Your Honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to Mr. Rice. Any?
No, Your Honor.
He's your witness, Mr. Bukako. Well, let's ask Mr. Genko if he has any questions first. Anything?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Bartel?
No questions for this witness.
So Mr. Bukako, I guess you could call it redirect or rehabilitation or something, but if you have any other type of questions for this witness, now would be the time.
I don't believe any redirect is necessary for Mr. LaSalle under the circumstances, but thank you for asking, Mr. Hearing Exam.
Well, and thank you all for bearing with me, asking some questions which I had on my mind. Can we release this gentleman for today?
Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. LaSalle, thank you very much for being here. We're going to move on to the next witness. Have a great day. You can continue to follow on YouTube. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Mr. Bigato. Call.
Yes, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I would call our last witness for this proceeding, Ms. Gabriella Dashino.
Wonderful. I was thinking about, I owed Mr. Lee a few breaks from the morning, and I'm wondering if I could pay him back in the afternoon. But since we're ready to go with Ms. Dashino, I think we'll just try to nail this thing and put it to sleep. Let's have her sworn in, Ms. Dashino, through Mr. Lee, and then we'll hear your testimony. Mr. Lee, swear her in, please.
Would you please raise your right hand? You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Bigato, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Good afternoon, Ms. Dashino. I trust you're well.
I am.
Well, we are going to try to get the direct testimony you filed in this case on October 8th moved into the evidentiary record. Are you down with that?
I am.
All right. I trust and hope you have a copy of what I've provisionally marked as Staff Exhibit 4 in front of you, which obviously should be your direct testimony. You got that?
I have it.
Ms. Dashino, would you take a moment to flip through Staff Exhibit 4 to make sure that it is a complete and accurate rendition of the testimony you filed in this case?
It is.
And I understand that your direct testimony was prepared by you or at your direction, including the attachments there too. Is that a safe presumption on my part?
That is correct.
And I also understand that you don't have any corrections to make to Staff Exhibit 4. Is that true, Ms. Dashino?
That is true.
Finally, now, if you were asked the same questions as what we see posed in your direct testimony, would your answers to those questions still be the same as what we see in the pre-filed testimony?
Yes, they would.
Well, with that then, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I would move for the admission into the evidentiary record, the direct testimony of Gabriella Dashino, which has been marked as Staff Exhibit 4.
Thank you, Mr. Bigato. Let's see if there's any objection. I have to ask and put it on the record. Ms. Lees?
SPS has no objections. Thank you.
Sardi, does SPS still have no objections?
SPS still has no objections, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Rice, please.
No objections, thank you.
You guys make this so pleasant. Mr. Getko?
No objections. Thank you.
Let's go for everything here. Mr. Bartel, do you have any objection to admission of Staff Exhibit 4?
No objections to this exhibit.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone. There being no objection, the motion is granted. The document labeled Staff Exhibit 4, which is the direct testimony of Gabriella Dashino, dated October 8th, is hereby admitted and is now part of the record, and it will be considered as evidence. We can have some cross-examination or some further examination, and I might have a question or two. I'm going to go through the parties again and see if they have any questions for you, Ms. Dashino. How about SPS through Ms. Lees? Any questions?
SPS has no questions for Ms. Dashino, but thanks her for making herself available today.
Okay, since Ms. Hardy seems like she's in a different place, I'll ask her also. Do you have any questions, Ms. Hardy?
I do not, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Out of order, different order. Mr. Getko, you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rice, any questions?
No, thank you.
Wow, so you're gonna make me feel bad about asking questions, aren't you? I know this trick. All right. I just wanna, your testimony is relatively short, and probably the most important thing is that you reduce the revenue requirement, which of course reduces the amount of the rate rider figure. And the basis for reducing reducing the revenue requirement is essentially the legacy meter amortization, the unamortized amount of depreciation. You pull that out of the calculation. Am I correct about that?
That's correct.
And the reason you said is because SPS should not collect twice on the legacy meters. And that sounds really clean and really good, and I get that. It sounds very logical. But I wonder if you could explain it to me, since I've got you in person here, how you conclude that they would otherwise be collecting twice.
Okay, so the legacy meters are currently in rates right now.
Got it.
So if you even just look at the rebuttal of Stephanie Neiman, I'm sorry, am I getting her last name right? I may have pronounced it wrong. Her rebuttal shows the amount that is being collected through current rates right now. In one of her work papers, she only has a summary that was filed, but her work paper does show that that is occurring currently. So if you allow them to collect the remaining balance in the rider, therefore it's going to be collected twice.
Okay. Well, let's, I really don't like speculation in these kind of cases, but I will give a little hypothetical. But if, say, there's a rate case in year 2022 in the summer, there's going to be an examination of the determination of the rates, and does it all kind of come out in the wash at that point? But what I mean is, the rates, the base rate's going to be adjusted because there is no longer going to be that amortization added in. Am I correct?
I would agree with that, but I believe those rates wouldn't be in effect until possibly 2023.
I see.
So in that aspect, if we did a 2-year amortization, that collection would still be occurring in 2022 and 2023.
Okay, and you're all right, and you're presuming, because you're claiming the double collection thing, that the rate rider would also continue beyond the next rate case, of course, right?
I believe the rate rider, they've requested approval for 2022, and all the other amounts, they were just there for illustrative purposes. So I'm not sure SPS's intention on revising or doing anything with the rider.
Right, the GMR rider we're talking about.
Correct.
So you're not sure if they're going to discontinue that and roll it into the base rates. Is that what you mean?
Correct.
All right, just make sure we're all on the same plane. And yes, I that's how I read it, and that's how I understand it as well. Okay, I have no further questions of this witness, but again, since I asked some questions, I'm going to allow follow-up. Ms. Sees, any follow-up?
I do just have some quick follow-up. Ms. Deschno, you reviewed the rebuttal testimony of Stephanie N. Nemi, correct?
I did review that rebuttal.
And were you by any chance watching the YouTube link yesterday when she testified?
Yes, I understand. Yes.
And do you understand the proposed credit that she presented in her rebuttal testimony to address the concern of the double collection on the legacy meters?
Yes, I do. She did rebut that she agreed with Andrea Crean's recommendation to credit the customers back what they were collecting through rates, which on her work papers included the return.
Does that credit address your concern about there being double recovery of the legacy meters?
It addresses the concern of double recovery of the return of, but not the weighted average cost of capital return on.
Okay, so it addresses, I guess I might need you to explain that a little bit, how it does not address that concern.
Okay, so the amount that is being refunded to customers based on the work papers provided was $967,125 or something. And based on what SPS is requesting in the GMR rider, if we did that comparison of that first year, the return that SPS would receive is 1,404,000. So, they're still going to be earning a return on those legacy meters.
Even though the credit is going to flow back through the GMR.
Yes, even though.
Is it your understanding that the legacy meters are going to be used and useful through the year 2023?
Yes.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Lees. Let's go to Ms. Hardy, see if she has any questions.
I do not, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy. Mr. Getko, questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Bartel
No questions for this witness.
and Mr. Rice.
No questions, thank you.
Would you care to do any rehabilitation or redirect?
You know what? I don't think it's necessary in this instance, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as far as I can see, that concludes the testimony necessary from Ms. Deschanel. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Mr. Bogatko, can we release Ms. Deschanel?
Yes, please.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Have a great day. Mr. Bogatko, is there any other evidence you would like to present on behalf of staff?
No, staff will rest its case at this point, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now let me look at my crib sheet that I write for myself to see if there's anything else we need to address at this point. I actually don't see anything, but I don't even trust myself. Sometimes I forget things. Miss Lee, we could do a closing argument, but we didn't do an opening either, and I don't think a closing is necessary. Typically in a closing, counsel would tell me how they've proven their case, and opposing counsel would tell me how the moving party had not proven their case. These cases are very complex, substantial evidence. I'm the first trier of fact, and then I make a recommendation, of course, based on the law to the commission for a final decision. I don't think you're going to sway me one way or another with a closing argument, but I'll ask anyhow. Do you care to make a closing argument?
If other parties would like to, I'm happy to provide a brief closing argument, but because I didn't know you wanted one, I didn't prepare one. So,
like I said in the beginning, I've practiced trial law for like 30 years, and I did a whole bunch of them. So when I started,
it's a little different.
I first expected them. I was surprised the lawyers didn't do so.
Well, and especially if you don't think it'll have any utility for you or very little utility, then I'm okay moving forward.
I don't need it. So there you go. But since I asked you, I'll ask if anybody else has a burning desire to do a closing argument. Mr. Bogatko?
No burning desire for a closing argument, especially since we didn't do opening arguments, but I would offer, if it's of any use to you, the possibility. I'm a little reluctant to sign myself up for this, but if you're interested at all in us at least briefing some of the issues in contention, I would offer that if it's at all helpful to you. But outside of that, I have nothing further to add.
Well, it'd be presumptuous to say it's helpful, having not seen it. I welcome legal argument, which is, I believe, what you're presenting, and you could summarize facts, scenarios. I mean, facts which are in the record. I'm sure that would burden the other counsel with responses there too. But I welcome that. How do you feel about that, Ms. Lees?
SPS would like a opportunity to do some briefing in this case. There are a couple of contested issues that I think warrant some legal argument.
There's two on board, and I'm not going to say the most important two, but I'm going to go next to Mr. Gedko and see how you feel about doing some briefing, essentially summarization in my perspective and application of all the facts in the case. Are you agreeable?
Yeah, I expected as much. Yes.
Mr. Bartel, fine with you as well?
Yes, if I'm understanding what you're really asking for is for a written closing statement on the issues that we think are important for you to consider. I'm getting your drift.
For your position. And a response to Mr. Well, I would say we have to do a little schedule. We'll do a schedule. Let's see if Mr. Rice has any problem. It can be as substantial as you choose it to be, Mr. Rice. Are you on board with this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, I would think the correct procedure might be that Ms. Lees present such a summarization or summary rather, and then that the other parties have a week or so to respond. There's another way we could do it. We can set a deadline and then everybody, typically about 4:59 p.m. on the deadline day, sends me an email with an attachment, and they all start rolling in at one time. I don't have a strong preference. I can see the benefit of each way of doing that. Do you have a preference, Ms. Lee?
I prefer that all parties have an opportunity to brief their case and have an opportunity to respond to other briefs.
Okay, so you're saying that's even another way, having response briefs to everyone else's brief. Okay, so I agree with that. That's fine. Mr. Bogatko, how do you feel?
That's acceptable, and that's in keeping with practice as I've observed in other of our proceedings.
All right, let's set some deadlines. Let me see if I can find my calendar here, since I'm not in my home office. Let me, give me a second here. Well, the good news is I was ahead to bring the calendar. Okay, I want to make it easy for everybody. The commission is taken off a few weeks from having weekly meetings, but I don't think that really concerns us because I believe we're going to be into the January meetings anyhow. So today it's the 10th for the first submission. I actually have another relatively substantial hearing starting on the 30th and one in December. Just to let you know of my workload. I like, frankly, to do my recommendation soon after the hearing because it's fresh and I will have most recently reviewed the testimony and then I will have an opportunity to review the transcript one more time and it's all frankly fresh. So the further we push this back, like in December-ish, the harder it is for me to do the recommended decision. That being said, I do have other hearings scheduled, so perhaps it doesn't make as much difference as I'm indicating. Let's ask Ms. Lees first, because she is the applicant, representing the applicant. How much time would you need to put together to do a summary?
I would say 2 weeks at the least.
Okay, well, at least, sounds like at least.
Mr. Hearing Examiner,
I was about to say, I will say that I know that all of the parties in this case, I believe, have a hearing next week as well, so that could change things.
Yeah, it's a strange nature of this business that, we're working even when you don't see us and we have other stuff going on. Sometimes people ask me, why didn't you just rule on that motion? Or why didn't you just issue that protective order when I sent it to you yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock? And, there are reasons.
Mr. Hearing Examiner,
I know we're still on the record. Mr. Bartel, yes, sir, what's your opinion?
So I just wanted to make a suggestion. It seems like oftentimes it makes sense to get some idea of when the transcript of proceedings will be ready. Because I find it useful, I don't know if you do, to have point cites to important testimony in the closing statement, just tightens it up. So I don't know what Mr. Lee's schedule is like, but maybe that's a piece of information we could obtain.
The good news is the commission has asked him to do an expedited transcript, and the commission is going to pay for it. So is that correct, Mr. Lee?
Yes, sir.
So when might we see it?
I would say you should have all the transcripts by Friday.
Wow, amazing. That'll be transmitted electronically to myself. Will it go to the council on the case as well?
Yes, sir.
Will the exhibits be attached also?
Yes, sir.
Wow, very impressive. So there's your answer, Mr. Bartel. If I have never mentioned it to you guys, I've actually trained to be a mediator, and I always try to get some consensus among the lawyers, and I try to avoid directing from above. Rather, I like to have agreement from below and have everyone participate. And that's why I'm asking you guys to offer to me what is comfortable for you. Ms. Lee says basically at least 2 weeks. Mr. Brigotko, how much time would you need?
I think that the parameters set forth by Ms. Lees for an initial brief look, it looks like it's doable.
24th?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rice, 24th?
I think, knowing that the following day is Thanksgiving, I would prefer it be maybe a day earlier or the following Monday, but if the 24th is the best date for all of the parties, then we'll happily do that.
Honestly, I was thinking December 1st. Does anybody have an objection with December 1st?
No objection from staff. Thank you.
Okay, well, that gets the whole Thanksgiving thing out of the way, unless everybody's going to work under Thanksgiving holiday. And I know some private counsel that do that kind of stuff. I was pretty close to at least one of them. So any other objection? I'm just going to ask generally, any objection to the first submission being due on the close of business on December 1st, Wednesday, December 1st? No objection. Mr. Bartel's waving his head left and right. Mr. Gedko, can I have some movement from you?
I support that. I don't object.
He supports it and doesn't object. That's good. Ms. Hardy, you good? She's waving.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. And Ms. Lees, you said at least, so the first is within your parameters. And okay, we've got consensus. It's going to be due December 1st. Let me write that down before I don't write it down. December 1st. These pens quit on me. Okay, thereafter, we can have responses there too. Do we like 2 weeks thereafter on the 15th of December?
I was going to suggest December 10th. I think
Okay,
response briefs usually don't take as much time as your initial, but
yep. Response brief on the 10th. Good with you, Mr. Brigotko?
December 10th looks doable. Thank you.
Mr. Gedko?
I would have preferred the full 2 weeks, given other matters that are at hand. I'll make it work as needed, but that would be my preference.
Bartel, what is your preference?
I'm also going to advocate for a full 2 weeks, just because of intervening depositions and hearings that are going to occupy that prior week for me.
Yeah, that's what I mean about there's other stuff we all do when we're not doing other things. Mr. Rice, do you have a position?
I have no preference between those 2 dates.
Do you intend to submit briefs?
We are not totally sure yet, but I think there's at least a chance of that.
I only ask because you didn't present evidence. and
Yes,
Somewhat of a lesser activity within the case, and that's why.
yes, I totally understand.
Well, Ms.
Mr.
Lee,
Hearing Examiner,
yes, sir.
staff has no objection to accommodating Mr. Bartelt and his client and Mr. Getko and the Attorney General's office if they want it to be on the 15th. We can also make that work, and I understand the press of time and that we all have other things going on. So I'm totally sympathetic to that. Thank you.
I'm getting positive feedback from Miss Lees, even though she hasn't said anything. That's one reason I keep these TV screens on. Miss Lees, you wouldn't have a problem if we stretched it to the 15th, would you? Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
Well, my position is it's not really that significant, moving from the 10th to the 15th. So to make the counsel for litigants happy, the response briefs will be due on December 15th. Close of business. If you guys want to really impress me and send it before 4:59 on the 15th, I would not mind seeing it on the 13th or the 14th or the morning of the 15th or something like that. That'd be great. Okay, now what else do we need to talk about? Usually one of you guys asks me, so when am I going to see an RD? And I usually don't have a really good answer for that. That's the honest truth of it. But I'm going to ask anyhow. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything else we can discuss before we close the record in this proceeding and end the meeting? Ms. Lee?
Nothing further from staff. Nothing further, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Thank you very much for your time and attention to this case.
You know, it's truly been a pleasure. I might mention it, and I don't mind this being in the transcript, Mr. Lee. You guys have been very pleasant to work with and very, well, that's enough. You've been very pleasant to work with, and I appreciate that. I'll speak on behalf of all of you, to each of you as well. You know, it makes it more pleasant. This stuff can be difficult, and it can be dense, so to speak. And you know, we're all just human beings, body and bones and flesh and blood and stuff. And we all have family life and personal life and a work life. And we try to balance some of those things. And these cases with, you know, 2 reams, double-sided paper of evidence to be sorted through and different positions, different parties can be challenging. And it really makes it as easy as possible when we have cooperation. We don't have anything unusual happening. You guys all were very understanding, and I thank you again for my technical difficulties today. So I really appreciate that. I just want you to know that wholeheartedly. I want to express my appreciation. Other than that, I have nothing further. Ms. Lees, is there anything further from SPS?
I'll let Ms. Hardy confirm, but no, nothing further from SPS.
She's glad to have your permission. Ms. Hardy,
That's correct, Your Honor. Nothing further. Yes. Thank you.
Getco, I want to welcome you and thank you for appearing. And I'm glad you were here. You asked some really wonderful questions, some good questions, some well-reasoned questions that helps to have a better record. And do you have anything further that we need to do before we close this proceeding?
No, and I just want to thank you for a good hearing. Thank you.
Bartel, thank you again. We've had a few together, and it's good to see you again. Do you have anything else? Do you know of anything else we need to cover before we adjourn?
No, I do want to thank you for accommodating my schedule this morning. Hopefully the silver lining in your internet problems was that you had a reason to get out of the house. Thank you for attending to this hearing.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, that's real life, you know. Mr. Rice, do you have anything that you think we should cover before we adjourn? I'm going to once I turn this off, it's hard to get everybody connected again.
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner, and I'll look forward to having more to say in a future proceeding.
All right, well, I go through this all very methodically. You know, it's part of the technology thing. If you were all sitting here, I could catch you running out the door, but it's difficult to catch you running out the door. Well, then I will look forward to receiving your briefs and the response briefs. And I'm likely to just put this on my pile of things, my waiting pile, and I'll move on to some other cases in the meantime. Mr. Lee, is there anything you would like to say or anything else we should address here?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And I want to express my appreciation for Mr. Lee. You know, it's a hard job what he does. And he does it very, very professionally. He's obviously knows what he's doing, and we appreciate him working for us. This is some difficult material with some strange letters and words and things that are not used in the vernacular at the plaza here in Santa Fe. Okie dokie, I'm going to shut down. It's now 12:59 p.m. Wow, we met for 1 hour or so in the afternoon, 12:59 p.m. The hearing is hereby adjourned. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Your
you.
Honor. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Mr. Lee. And thank you, Ms. Hardy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Please, everyone. Bye-bye.